Hey, 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 guess who's back? Boom, guess who stepped in the room? It ain't SWV, but it is Kendell and Leroy for More Than Just a Movie, Season 5. Woo! All right, we
Man,
are
it's been
Season
five
5, and
seasons already.
yup,
Wow.
yup, 5 seasons. So I'm just like, wow, Leroy, we was doing it. I'm thinking about you probably was doing yours in one sitting. I think I've done these in different places. Like each time, that's how I know how long. I said, we've been doing this
Mhm.
thing for a long time. A long time. Like that green. Green's my favorite color.
Yes, absolutely. That's my
Oh yeah, I got
Beyonce.
mine. Yeah. Oh, oh, I have my green one too. I have my green one
Hmm.
too. All right, y'all. Welcome to Kendell Lenice channel. This is my channel. Please subscribe. Like this show, comment, like all of that. We're doing all of that. But this is about more than just a movie where we break down classic black films. All right, let's get it. I haven't been in the lab in a minute. All right, making sure everything is good. All right, Leroy. So when we left them in season 4, I know they haven't seen season 4 in a long time, but go watch the replay. The last we did was no, it's not. I didn't put it on there. I didn't put it on there. On Facebook, or we can share it to Facebook. Let's share it to Facebook right now. While we're waiting, let's just share it to Facebook right now. I'm gonna share it right now. Boop boop boop. So Leroy, while I'm doing that, tell the people what we ended with faith-based movies. That's what we ended season 4. Talk about that a little bit, and then we're gonna go into it. And that way, I'll share this while we're talking.
Which one did we end with Overcomer, or was it the War Room? Because we did Overcomer, War Room. Did we do Facing the Giants? I don't think we did that one.
No,
But
but
anyway,
I wanted to show because we last. No, go ahead.
no, I was just saying I can't remember which one we ended with, but we did the whole month for faith based movies, and I know War Room and Overcomer were two of the movies that we did. Um, I don't remember the other ones for some reason that we did with those, but what our intention was to bring attention to those movies that we don't think that a lot of people might have been aware of, but they were just excellent movies. And these particular movies were written, directed, produced by the brothers. These are not brothers, but they are biological brothers. And they produced the Facing the Giants. They did Overcomer, War Room. They've done all of those movies. One of the brothers is actually in each of these movies, and then the other one does
Yeah,
the production side. Does the production side,
yeah,
and their movies are always excellent. They have a great storyline. They have a great message to them, and they always have that faith based foundation in them. So you're not gonna it's not gonna beat you over the head with it or anything like that. But it's going to let you know that those that are in the movie and those that have written these movies, they've written it specifically for their niche, which is Christian based
yeah,
moviegoers, if you
yeah,
will. Remember back in the day,
yeah,
or I don't know if this happened to you, but your grandmama and them, or even your father or your mother that were holier than thou said you couldn't go to the movies, because that was the devil's work if you went to the movies. So now that we have these faith based movies, maybe that can be put to the side, and it won't be we won't be heathens because we went to the movies and watched the movies.
Right. Well, I didn't I was at the movies all the time when I was little, so I wasn't told that, thank God, because I wouldn't have been able to see Crush Groove, Disorderlies, New Jack City,
I know, right?
all of that. But this is season 5, right? This is season 5 of More Than Just a Movie. So we have done all your favorite movies. Go back and listen to or watch all the replays. We have done your favorite classic Black films, right? So we switched it up and we focused on certain playwrights or certain directors or creators like Spike Lee, Denzel, Angela Bassett. We've done a lot of different things in More Than Just a Movie to bring the movies in a different way. Even Ruth Carter, Oscar award-winning wardrobe stylist and creator. So this season, on season 5, we were like, let's do some classic Black TV, right? We've done the movies, and this is More Than Just a Movie, so we're never going to not do movies, but we want to switch it up a bit and do things differently. So we said in season 5, we are going to talk about classic Black TV. So what we're talking about today is the Jeffersons, moving on up with the Jeffersons. Now, I remember when the Jeffersons was on at 9 p.m. on Sunday nights. I remember it was really must see TV. Do you remember when the Jeffersons aired? I literally remember watching it every single week.
Yeah, but I don't remember the time. I don't remember being I guess that late in the evening, but I'm sure it was.
Yeah,
I just remember
yeah.
watching it because there's so many, and we're going to be covering several of them, but that was probably, and I don't know if this was the first show on TV that showed us in a upwardly mobile family,
Mm.
as an upwardly mobile family. I can't think of anyone that
Right.
was
If you're
before
talking
them.
about family, right.
Right.
Talking about family, right? If you're talking about family, this was it.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I don't know if we lost her or not, but yeah, it was definitely, and you're talking the 1970s, when the Jeffersons first came out. And what happened was, the Jeffersons was a spin-off of All in the
Of
Family.
All in the Family. So let's talk about it.
Yeah.
The Jeffersons is an American sitcom television series, and it broadcasted on CBS from January 18th, 1975 to July 2nd, 1985, lasting 11 seasons and a total of 253 episodes. The Jeffersons is one of the longest running sitcoms in history. Second longest running series with a primarily African American cast by episodes count behind Tyler Perry's House of Pain. Now that's because that had he films every, he films every day with that, but it's so interesting. So the premise of the Jeffersons was, and like Leroy said, it was a spinoff of All in the Family. So the show focuses on George and Wheezy Jefferson, a prosperous Black couple who have been able to move from Queens to Manhattan, owning the success of George's dry cleaning chain, Jefferson Cleaners. The show was launched as the second and longest running, once again, spinoff of All in the Family, which the Jeffersons had been neighbors of Archie and Edith. You remember that. The show was created by Norman Lear. He also created All of the Family and Good Times. Um, and but the episodes, if you think about this, in the 70s, Leroy, in the 80s, they focused on alcoholism, racism, um, gun control. They talked about transgender, um, illiteracy, uh, talking about the N word and then the H word, honky. You know what I mean? They like really hit soft spots. When you think about the Jeffersons, what's the first thing that comes to your mind, Leroy?
Well, I think about, like I was saying, I think about this being the first television show that showed us in a upperly mobile light. And here was this
Mhm.
entrepreneur. I mean, I wasn't
Mhm.
even when it came out. It was 75, so I was 6 years old. But to
Mhm.
85, I was a very young boy. And I
Mhm.
just remember
High
watching
school
it,
too.
and it, as I
Mhm.
because I still may watch an episode here or there, on TV, because I think it
Mhm.
still comes on. It's still coming on
Mhm.
now. But as I look back now through the
Mhm.
lens of being 54, and I see the way that the writing is and was on the show, I was like, wow, they really, the Jeffersons, I'm sure we'll get the Good Times. They were two of the shows that they went hard at the topics that they went at. It was like they didn't
Yeah.
care. They really, they attacked those, like you were just talking about, the topics that they covered. They were unafraid to go after and talk
Yeah.
about those things that not other shows wanted to
Yeah.
talk about at that time. So I thought it was say, let's say before
For
its time,
sure.
but it was phenomenal
It
to
was
be able to hear it now.
trailblazing.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Definitely trailblazing. And I knew we were going to be talking about this, but, and we'll talk about maybe our favorite episodes, or what we've, kind of the episodes that we kind of have brought to light and stuff like that. But it was always the funniest thing was always the banter between George and Florence. That was always the thing that made it so funny. And here's the thing too, and I want you to speak to this too. Weezy was a stay-at-home wife, wasn't she?
Yeah. No, and volunteered at the help center.
Okay, okay, okay. So you
Remember, she
had
was
those
volunteering at the
dynamics.
help center.
Okay. Hmm.
Yeah. But she was, you're absolutely right, because she was a stay-at-home mom, but I mean stay-at-home mom because her son Lionel was grown, but
Yeah,
she
he
was.
was grown. Right, right.
Yeah, but you think about it, because she was, there weren't a lot of black women of leisure on television. And you're talking in the 70, the 75, I mean in the 70s and the 80s.
Right.
It wasn't. So she could go shopping, she could stay home, she can volunteer her time at the help center where she always was. That was a woman of leisure. She can go have lunch with her other rich friends. You know what I'm saying? And when you do think about that, that was way before its time. Way before, because we were used to seeing black, outside of Julia with Diane Carroll, and that was one of the first breakouts with it. She was a nurse, but you think about it, it was just the Florence character. And even on Jefferson's, and we'll talk about Florence's character, they still didn't make her the stereotypical maid that has to keep her head down and you can't talk to the owners, and they still gave a voice even to the quote unquote help, which I thought was fantastic. So we're talking about Isabel Sanford, Sherman Hemsley. They were married, they were George and Wheezy. Wheezy was way older than Sherman Hemsley, but we didn't know that. They
Really?
played it so well.
Oh, okay.
Yes, way older. I have to look. I remember when that was out. I'm talking about like maybe almost 20 years, like older.
Oh, wow.
And I remember that when I was young, and how, and I'm going to look at the ages now, because Isabel Sanford was way older, and that played her, and he was young. A lot of people don't know that Sherman Hemsley was very young when he played that. So she was born in 1917.
Oh, wow.
1917. Yes, I'm telling you. And she was
Get out
way
of
older,
here.
and Sherman was, yes, and she looked amazing. And he was
Yes,
born in 1938. Think about that. He was born
That's
in
almost 20 years.
1930.
That's 21 years.
That's what I'm saying. And I remember that like
Wow.
she was old enough to be his mom.
Correct. Correct. And
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
my grandmother on my mom's side was born in 1919.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
that goes to show that generation. I didn't
Yeah.
realize that.
Yeah.
Wow, 19. I didn't realize
Yeah.
that was that. Well, I mean, and even but even with that, like you were saying, that even with that age that you can tell, I guess back then,
Yeah.
the producers and everything like that didn't, I'm sure they knew their ages, but didn't see
Yeah.
that there was you know, that you couldn't tell. You couldn't tell by looking at Miss Isabel Sanford that. I mean, you figure in the 70s she was what, maybe in her
Grown, grown,
60s.
grown,
Yeah,
grown. So think about that. And think about how young she looked when it first started. Remember, she used to have the little house dresses on and the little curls.
yeah,
And she was looking young. And Sherman Hemsley, but the way their chemistry and even
yeah,
how they looked together was
yeah, yeah. They
dynamic
look like
that
a
they
super.
probably did a test. Yeah,
Yeah,
they probably did a
yeah,
test and they couldn't go wrong with that.
yeah, yeah,
They probably were like,
definitely.
"This is undeniable." And then we have Marla Gibbs, who played Florence, obviously. We have Roxy Roker, Lenny Kravitz's mama, who played
Yep,
Helen Willis. And you got Franklin Cover, who played Mr. Willis. Then you have Paul Benedict. He played, what's the neighbor?
yeah. Mr. Bentley.
You
What wasn't it?
know,
Was it
Mr.
Mr. Bentley?
Bentley. Yeah, Mr. Bentley, and then you had no, Paul Benedict was, yeah, and then you have Mike Evans who played Lionel. That was the first Lionel because remember it was two
Yeah, 'cause
Lionels. Um,
they
this is the one with the afro, well, the bigger
they
afro because the other one had the little teeny weeny afro.
they did
Then you
the.
had Berlinda Tolbert who played Jenny, and then you had Damon Evans. I mean, it's just so many, and let's talk about Jeanette Dubois from Good Times. Walona is the one who sang the theme song. Well, we're moving on now to the east side. Come on, Leroy, to a deluxe apartment in the sky. Moving on now, moving on now. Come on, how you gonna leave me
And
hanging? We
when I
finally
found
got
out
a piece of the pie.
that she wrote that, I was like, wow.
And sang it, and sang it,
What
wrote it
I
and
mean,
sang
yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I was like, oh wow. I was like, she did
Mhm.
that. I mean, you got to think that was, how I wonder how. And I don't know I'd love to know the backstory with that. You know what I'm saying? How she
Mhm.
came to write that
Probably Norman
song.
Lear, probably Norman Lear. Probably
You
Norman
think so?
Lear because he created Good Times and The Jeffersons.
Yeah, you
He
got a point.
created both of them.
Yeah, you got a point.
So,
Yeah,
we so. And people don't understand that the Jeffersons was very controversial. It was
yeah,
controversial because of the subject matters that they spoke about, but it was also controversial because um black people were moving on up, and what comes with that, and what the stereotypes are, and should they be leading this, and should they be leading the ratings on NBC, and all of the other, issues that we had in our climate at that time, even in the 70s and 80s. I mean, we're still dealing with it now in
yeah,
2023. So,
yeah,
with that, and to be able to head it. And I love the fact that it was brown people and Wheezy was brown. You know what I mean? Because a lot of times it was the light skinned women. If they're going to give it to black women, it had to be the lighter skinned black women to run the, lead. And now we're talking about an older brown skinned woman. People don't understand how big that is because we just know George and Wheezy. but that was like huge to be able to do that. And not a model-esque looking black woman either. You know what I mean? Got to be thinner, you got to have lighter, longer hair, and all of that. They didn't do all of that. And I love
And
that.
you make a great point, because when you think about Good Times and the Jeffersons, neither one of the main characters in the on the show, they weren't necessarily dark skinned, but I mean Esther Roll was dark, considered dark skinned. Well,
Yeah.
actually both of them
Yeah.
were brown, brown to
Yeah.
dark skin,
Brown skin.
but they weren't the stereotypical, size 6, with the
Exactly.
long hair, because
Exactly.
Florida Evans had natural hair. Esther Roll had natural
Mhm.
hair. And
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
think Weezy wore she wore again, I don't know if those were wigs that she
She
wore
had
or
a press
not.
and curl. She had a press and
But
curl, like a press and
so
curl.
but those were, that was a game changer as well too, because it gave you a
Mhm.
different imagery of what black women look like.
Mhm.
It gave you a
Mhm.
different spectrum. It didn't have to be, it wasn't
Mhm.
where it was like that,
Mhm.
that it had to be the
Mhm.
Hollywood type of woman or anything
Mhm.
like that, which I think is great.
Mhm.
And folks,
Mhm.
well, I don't want to talk about, we'll talk about her when we talk about Good Times, but Esther Roll, when you look at her background and her history, phenomenal.
And she comes from that age, the same age group as Isabel Sanford.
That's your, yeah,
Um, yeah. But
yeah.
when
So,
you think about, even the Jeffersons, it was created in 1975, but the first time that Isabel Sanford was on All in the Family, it was the year I was born. It was 1971. It was an
okay.
episode called Lionel Moves into the Neighborhood, and it broadcasted March 2nd, before I was born, 1971. And it was the eighth episode in that. And they were talking about basically Lionel and this black boy moving into the neighborhood. So they were touching stuff that people weren't touching back then. And Norman Lear, people don't know that he created this role for Sherman Hemsley. So
Oh,
the
okay.
character
Okay.
was specifically made
Go
for
ahead.
Hemsley. Lear originally intended for George to appear in the first season of the series on All in the Family, because remember Weezy would always appear on All in the Family, and she wanted
Hmm.
George too, but he was doing Pearly on Broadway at the time, so he was unable to do it. Lear created the character Henry Jefferson, George Younger's brother, who was
Hmm.
portrayed by Mel Stewart, and then replaced George with Henry when it was time. So originally it was they wanted to make sure they introduced them, but Sherman wasn't able to do it. And then the idea of the Jeffersons moving on up came from three members of uh the Panthers who were fans of Lear's and visited the office. Check that out. Raising issues with the creator over the portrayal of black people on television, including Maude. I used to love some Maude, was a spinoff series, which Good Times was a spinoff of Maude. Because remember, I don't know if you remember, but Esther Roll, Florida Evans, was like the help on Maude. Do you
Okay.
remember
Okay. I
that?
remember
And then
Maud. Yeah,
there's
I remember
Maud.
Maud.
Yeah. And the Panthers from Oakland, we know those Panthers, were like, they were tired of that portrayal
Right.
of black people. So that's why they created the Jeffersons to show a upper mobile, I should say, black family. So think about that. The Panthers came to the CBS offices. That's deep.
No, but that just goes to show you too, that they, at least that it was good that they were open to hearing that, and to say, hey,
Yes.
you know what, you're right. We do need to have
Yep.
more representation, better
Yep.
representation,
Yeah.
on television than but and you got to think about too. Think about that era. Think about the
Yeah.
70s, and maybe the
Yeah.
early. I don't know if it went into the early '80s, but the black exploitation movies that we
Yeah.
talked a little bit. I think we talked a little bit
Yeah.
about. There was always these stereotypes with the pimps and the pimps
Yeah.
and the hoes and the
Yeah.
drug dealers. Those were the
Yeah.
roles that were
Yeah.
put out there for us. Um,
Yeah.
and so it was great that they did say, "Hey, you know what? Yeah, let's write some stories of affluent black people," and that was
Right.
and that was the importance of to me that was the importance of Cosby, the Cosby Show, because it took what I guess what Norman Lear did with the Jeffersons, and they took it to even another level where you had two very intelligent, astute, married black couple that that were able to live in I don't know where there was it Brooklyn or the Bronx that that the Cosbys lived in
Brooklyn.
or lived in Huxtables
I
lived
think
in.
they were Brooklyn because they had their brownstone in Brooklyn.
Yeah. So, those were the kinds of
Mhm.
images that we needed to see and understand. Not that
Mhm.
Good
Mhm.
Times had its place as well too. I love the messages of Good Times. But even,
Mhm.
even with the Jeffersons, the messages that they kept. And you can see if you watch the episodes
Mhm.
of the Jeffersons, or if you watch the episodes of Good Time, you can see how they would be written by the same people, because the
Yeah.
topics and the issues that they dealt with were a lot of the
Yeah.
same, and they weren't afraid to deal with them
Yeah.
in each of those dynamics. One being an
Yeah.
upwardly mobile black family, one being a kind of a lower, a lower class or
Yes.
upper lower class family,
Mhm.
that type of thing. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
and I'm
So that was the good
and
thing.
yes. Yeah, it was a definite good thing, and this is what, Norman Lear said in his book. He said that the Panthers told him, every time you see a black man on the tube, he's dirt poor, wears ish on his clothes, and can't afford nothing. Lear consulted with Al Burton on the concept of the Jeffersons because the Panthers was like, no, every time we see him, he got to be, So George, Louise, and Lionel continued to appear on All in the Family until 1975, when the spinoff of the Jeffersons, also created by Lear, premiered. The characters Lionel and his multiracial fiance Jenny, and her family, of all whom appeared in 1974 on All in the Family. So he was prepping it, right?
Hmm.
And it was the episode of Lionel's engagements, and they were all written into the new um, series, which was The Jeffersons. Tom
Yeah, and
Willis. So Berlinda, of course, Berlinda Tolbert, who played Jenny. She was a veteran actor, Franklin Cover, who played Tom Willis, whose first name was changed from Lewis on All in the Family to Tom, and then Roxy Roker, Helen Roker. And Roker was asked during a casting interview if she was comfortable. I've heard this before, if she was comfortable having a white husband on the Jeffersons. And her response was showing her husband, which was Cy Kravitz, who was also white. Because, back then they had to ask in the 70s, like, hey, I know it's the Black Power movement. Are you okay with having a white husband on this show? And then, Art imitated life because her husband was already, her husband was white, as we know, Lenny Kravitz son. Lenny Kravitz dad. So George's career. So let's talk about a black man having not one cleaners, but a chain of his own businesses and cleaners, and what that imagery was like in the 70s. You want to talk about that as an entrepreneur yourself?
just think about it. I don't even think now that there are a chain of black owned cleaners.
Mm-hmm.
Can you think of
Mm-hmm.
any?
No. And I never have. Mm-mm. Other than Jefferson
And I'm
Cleaners, I don't
thinking,
know.
yeah, the cleaners that I go to, which is right down here on Milford Mill,
In
and
Baltimore.
Milford Mill and Ricerstown Road. It's black owned.
Mm-hmm.
It's black owned, but it's not a chain
Oh,
like
I didn't even
George.
know that was black. I didn't even know that was black owned. I have to
Yeah,
check them out. What's it
yeah.
called? Shout them out.
I forgot. Yeah, I forgot I can't remember the name of it, but I think that they are Africans. But
Mm-hmm.
I say it's black owned. I mean that's black owned. Um, but
Mm-hmm.
um, but I'm thinking about that. I mean, when you think about that, this is why this show was so groundbreaking, because it had so many dynamics to it. You had black entrepreneurship, you had the mixed couples, that was, that mixed racial couple
Mm-hmm.
that was on there. You had so
Mm-hmm.
many
Mm-hmm.
dynamics to it, and I think it was a great thing,
Mm-hmm.
about George owning a chain of dry cleaners, and because it was different.
Mm-hmm.
It's still different. you
Mm-hmm.
know and it
Mm-hmm.
gave us, especially those of us that grew up in the 70s, grew up in the 80s, that were, teenagers and young children at that time, to see something like that on TV. It's like, wow. And I didn't,
Yeah.
like I said, I didn't think about it back then. It was just it was a good show, because I'm 10,
Yeah.
12, you know 7,
Mm-hmm.
8,
And it
years
went all the
old.
way
So
up
I'm
until
just,
I was, and it went all the way up till I was like in ninth grade.
yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So when you think about it, and I can look back at it now through the lens of being an entrepreneur, and
Yeah,
say,
that's
man,
huge.
that was dope to see that. and
Yeah.
and being in an industry that we don't really, have a whole lot. We don't have a lot of ownership in. Like I said, there's some dry cleaners that are owned here, there, I believe. If you look at the numbers, I had to look at
Yeah.
those numbers. That's some interesting numbers. But to think of
Mm-hmm.
him owning a chain,
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, that's real
That's
dope.
big. It's big. It's huge. It's super dope to even have that imagery. So I thank the Panthers for that, really, because
Right.
that upward to be upward when it comes to us. And some people say mobile, some people say mobile, whatever your choice. But to show that, I think that that's huge because it was different imagery. So then when you do have something that comes down the line, like the Cosby Show, even though they're all in the same family, but that was like a prelude to
Correct.
what we see on TV. Like so when I'm little and I see a deluxe apartment and I'm singing that when I'm a child, that is something to be in your brain. Like, we can do everything. We had a balance even then. We had a balance with good times, getting fired from the car wash every 5 minutes, eating dog food for dinner on good times. You remember when the neighbor, we're going to talk about that, when she ate the dog food for
Yeah,
dinner
when
and
she
all
had
them
that
thought that
dog
they was,
food. Oh my
she was,
God. Yeah. But that was
we going to
that's
talk about
real
good
though.
times.
That was the thing about
Yes.
these shows. They were real
Yeah.
issues. They were real
Yeah.
topics
Yeah.
that they
But
dealt with.
even on this show, I didn't want to start with good times.
Mm,
You
hmm.
know what I'm saying? Like, even though that's part of the story, you don't want to, I didn't want to start with good times, right? Because we are talking about, even though it's a classic black films, and we will be talking about good times for sure. But I wanted to start with something for season 5 that changed the narrative and created something different for black folks to see. And even doing that, I just found out about the Panthers making it known about what they wanted to see. And I think that's amazing because even now we have to have a balance because we're not monolithic people. You know what I mean? There's some people living like good times. There's some people living like the Jeffersons. There's some people living like the Huxtables. There's some people, living like Dwayne and Whitley. We got to show it all. Educated black, black couples meeting in college, raising that it's all of us. And we definitely
Yeah,
talking about a different
we
world. That's
gotta
my
yeah
show.
we gonna have some good shows because you talking from the 70s, 80s,
Ooh,
and into the 90s, man. That had to be, and I think we've said this before when it comes to movies or entertainment, music. That has to be to me. That has to be those 3 decades have to be the greatest to me the greatest talent,
yeah,
the greatest time that I've
yeah,
ever creatively. I'm talking, like we
yeah,
said, we're talking music, we're talking TV, movies, television. It was just there was so much that came out
yeah,
of those 3 decades that we just look back
yeah.
on, and we were we were fortunate because that was our childhood, and to
That
be
was
able to
our
look back at it
childhood.
now,
Yeah,
yeah,
because the Jeffersons came on right before Fantasy Island. I remember that.
yes,
It
love
was
Fantasy
like, oh,
Island. That love those.
I remember watching it when it was 9 o'clock and it came on. I don't know. Because they changed the time. I think when I was
Yeah,
going to high school or junior high, I think it was like 9 o'clock on the Sundays. Before we end, I want to talk about Florence. We touched
yeah.
on her earlier. Wait, you live here? You live here? We done came up and nobody told me. That's one of my favorite. And ain't nobody. She like, wait a minute, you? Then she look at all these upward mobile black people like you, and I'm like nobody told me. Even though she was a household technician, she used to say a household, not a housekeeper, not a maid, a household technician. But I want to talk about when we know something is classic, just like movies. We talk about it. We know it's a classic black movie when you can recite lines without even thinking about it, and it's just a part of everyday's vernacular. That's the
Yeah,
same with these
yeah.
classic black films. We're gonna talk about a different world where Relax, Relate, Release. People that weren't even born didn't even hear of it. Saying that from a different world. People were talking about these lines. I haven't watched the Jeffersons in forever, but I remember when she was when I remember the episode so vividly. When she was talking about you live here, ain't nobody tell me, and talking about she was a household technician, and when Billy D. Williams came to the door, and just
That's the
all of these
episode right
different
there, man.
episodes when man, when they came, I mean, so many episodes, even with Mother Jefferson in the beginning with her Bloody Marys. Remember, Mother Jefferson would always come on, and just the dynamics that they showed. Okay, what is it like when your husband's a mama's boy, and the mother don't like the wife, and the
The
wife got a
daughter.
problem with
Yeah,
the mother-in-law, right? With the daughter. Then you got and I loved the way the show was layered, because
right.
even though George wasn't afraid, and then the funky chicken, we know about George doing the funky chicken all the time,
Don't
but
don't get
just
it
how
twisted.
he loved his,
Sherman Hemsley
right, how he loved his,
could cut a word. Sherman Hemsley could
yes,
cut a
yes,
word.
yes. And I just loved how the makeup of the show, because George Jefferson was wisecracking, and he was time enough for them. He wasn't going to let nobody, run him as this black man. But then it was a man who was still compassionate, loved his wife. They didn't write any episodes of him cheating on his wife, doing this, doing that. He loved his son, and even respected Florence in that way, and having that. And even though he was, wisecracking, people might say, what he was or whatever. But even when it came down to being a good friend, and showing the business and showing the compassion, and even how, remember back in the Jeffersons, where they used to go back to see what their childhood, like they had a couple episodes where they showed George as a little boy. They had a couple episodes where they showed Wheezy as a little girl, and how they got to where they are. And they talked about mental health. They talked about mental health in the 70s. Who was doing that? And when Weezy was
Yeah,
going to the help center, helping people. They talked about homelessness. They talked about racism all the time, indirectly and directly. They talked about interracial relationships and couples, both, and the children, and they talked about things that we needed to talk about. So when we talk about Florence, as we talked about earlier, is that even as a maid or a household technician, they still didn't make her stereotypical. And as the years progressed, she didn't have to wear the uniform. You know what I mean? It was almost like a house manager keeping them in line as a family.
Well, did she? They treated her like family, and it's just like, and I don't know if I think this is probably on our list. I don't see how it wouldn't be, but the Fresh Prince of Bel Air with
Oh yeah,
um with
I was thinking that in my head. Jeffrey.
yeah, with Jeffrey. He was there, he was there, the household technician or whatever, but at the same time he was still family. He was a part of
Yeah.
the family, and I believe that
Yeah.
Florence lived in the apartment with
Yeah.
them, didn't she?
Because in the beginning, well, remember in the beginnings when it first came out, and it's crazy. This is when you know it's a classic. This is when you know, because I have not seen it, and I can see everything in there. I can see episodes swarming around in my head. But remember, early on, she used to grab her pocketbook and grab. Remember, she used to leave and come.
Okay.
Remember it, and then she started, I guess, staying there. It well, they made the appearance as if that's where she lived, and she started
Yeah.
getting more comfortable. And who don't need somebody to help run their house, or when they're, busy or doing certain things? So she became a part of the family, and she was there for George, he was there for her. And that's
So,
where you think that Martin and Pam came from. Martin
yeah,
and
that
Pam
benefit, right.
are like, that's you know what I'm saying? We gotta pay
Yeah,
homage
absolutely.
where that whole
Yeah.
thing, and even Martin being little and skinny like Sherman Hemsley and dancing and stuff, that I mean, it's almost the same. It's
Well,
almost the same, but
yeah, no,
different.
and it really is. And they gave Hollywood the template for what could work.
Mhm.
You change
Mhm.
change the job titles and everything like
Mhm.
that, but the storylines
Mhm.
become become similar,
Mhm.
and you can use those
Mhm.
dynamics and everything like that. But I'm
Mhm.
before we go, and I know I'm gonna mess with you a little bit, right? Because I know we always talk about
Uh-oh.
the male female relationships, right? And you just brought up something that made me think about that, where they, how they have the where they call it the modern woman versus the traditional woman, right? So if Wheezy was
Mhm.
considered or will be considered a traditional woman, you know, then having Florence there to have help today, would that be, would that be considered? Because like you were saying, Wheezy would be leisurely. She wouldn't have to really do any work around the house because Florence was doing it. Florence was doing all the work and managing
The
the
woman of
house,
leisure.
and
Yeah.
she would,
But she earned that right. Mhm.
So it's funny when I look back at that show and I think about what people talk about today, and you see that, well,
Mhm.
I want to be some women want to call themselves a traditional woman. Well, okay,
Mhm.
this is what people talk about when they say a traditional woman. She's not really working in the home. Her son was an adult, so she
Mhm.
didn't have to worry about taking care of Lionel because he was out of the
Woman of
house.
leisure. Mhm. Until he had to keep coming back.
Well, that's what we do.
Lionel was back and forth and
That's what
switching
we
out
do. But
Lionels and everything. But the real
I know,
Lionel was like, "It's cold out there." Look, the original Lionel was like, "I'm coming back home," literally to Jefferson, and they kicked that temporary Lionel out. Mike Evans
well,
was like, "I
and,
need to come back." And he
and
was
then,
Mike Evans, and then Mike Evans, that was his real name, and then Mike Evans on Good Times. I thought that was interesting because
yeah,
Lionel's
but
real name is Mike Evans, and then you have Michael Evans on Good Times.
hmm Yep. So
But
it was,
I just want to, so I'm excited about season 5.
no,
Go ahead.
and I love it. I love it because there's so many shows that we're going to get into and that we're going to talk about because they
Mhm.
people want to say, well, that there are no good black shows. There were plenty of good black shows on TV.
Mhm.
You know,
Mhm.
they didn't.
Mhm.
Now, how long they lasted,
Mhm.
that's a different story. But there have
Yeah.
always
Mhm.
been some good black shows that have been created, and I believe should have,
Mhm.
definitely should have, done. I don't know if we're gonna have it on there, but Damon Wayans has created a number of shows that I thought were really good. I think his biggest one was
Oh,
probably
I
My
think
Wife
this
and
is good.
Kids. That's his biggest one,
That's an
but even
excellent
that
show. Mhm.
goes along with what we're talking about. These great shows, and
Mhm.
I think he even talked about it. He modeled
Mhm.
that show that he did after the Cosby Show. He wanted to have a show like that
Mhm.
that dealt, that was that
Mhm.
upwardly mobile family. They did well. They had the
Mhm.
kids and everything like that. And the think about it. To me, I think the Jeffersons opened that door for all of these other shows to be able to come
Mhm.
and do and be a part of, a part of Hollywood history,
Mhm.
so
Mhm. And then look, this Lionel was cheating on. Look, Jenny done had both of the leading black men. She had that one. That was the last one. And then, but then when you look at these iconic pictures, you know what I'm saying? When you look at
yeah,
these iconic pictures, it's just like, wow. And I remember she was always getting that Bloody Mary.
yeah, that yeah,
And that was the first.
Mother
And when I was
Jefferson.
little, I didn't know. Right, and I didn't know what no Bloody Mary was, and it's like
Well,
that's when I knew about it, even something like that, and I still didn't know. And then him doing the funky chicken, I just want to shout out, rest in paradise to, all think about it. Pretty, Marla Gibbs is still thriving and still doing her thing and still acting. She was just in the Miss Pat show, like she's still acting. But Sherman Hemsley passed away. Isabel Sanford, Roxy Roker. Um, I think if I'm not mistaken, the one who played Tom Willis. I remember Franklin Cover. So many people have passed away. But they left a true legacy. You know what I mean? So if you're young and you didn't see these shows, I encourage you to watch them. They are
yeah,
different than what's happening now, but they were trend setting. So some might watch it now and say, well, that's not that bad, but you have to think about the time and put it in perspective. In the 1970s and 80s, where people weren't talking about these subjects. They were bold enough to do it, and they did it in a funny, humorous way, but they did it in a real way to make you think. It wasn't buffoonery always. They might say, oh, because he walked like this, George Jefferson walked. It was no buffoonery. That was his character and who he was, but they talked about real issues. It wasn't like shucking and jiving. It
yeah.
wasn't an Amos and Andy type situation, you know?
Yeah, and it, I mean, it just it set the, it did, because you got to think this was a time when there wasn't a lot of representation of us on TV. You could probably count on,
Right,
two
right.
hands the number of black shows. I don't even think, I
Right.
think was Good Times or the Jeffersons was 75. I can't remember what day that Good Times came out, but weren't they like one of the first black shows on TV, if I'm not mistaken?
Because remember Julia and all of that. But they came
Okay,
out,
right,
it came out in 1974, Good Times did.
right, right. Okay,
So it
oh,
was
okay. So they
beforehand,
were just,
and that's why, yeah, and that's right, and that's why the Panthers was like, come on now, we got Maud, and then you got her on there. Always we're always the underling, the underdog. So. that took place. So that in Good Times went from 74 to 79. And I think that it's amazing that the Jeffersons went way longer than that, because
Hmm.
it showed that black people want to see different, want to see better. And then also they had the white audience, also they had the people who felt pushed aside, they had the interracial couples watching it. So it became broader than Good Times, because they had different, white people found it humorous because unfortunately, they sometimes they got to see themselves too. So then they saw that, but then you got, like they said, they were talking about transgender back then. They were talking about racism in a way back then. They were talking about poverty, but they weren't staying in poverty. They were talking about and not forgetting where they came from. And remember that one episode, they're just flashing through my mind, where George was giving money and nobody knew, like his heart, like giving money to people in his old neighborhood. I remember that, or going back to homeless people, different things like
Hmm.
that. So I thought it was a show that was rich and it had a lot of heart. Any last words about the Jeffersons?
Well, did was one of George's cleaners in his old neighborhood? Do you remember? Did they ever kind
I
of touch on?
I believe that's where the first one started. I
Hmm.
believe. I can't remember, but I
Because I
believe.
mean, even that would be important if it was, because it just shows you
Hmm.
the the power of economics, and how
Yeah.
the dollar should recycle in our
Yeah.
neighborhoods, and how that was
Yeah.
important, and
Yeah.
by him owning the chain in his old neighborhood, where he was able to live, that money could cycle
Giving back
itself,
to your community.
right, into the
Yeah.
neighborhood
And then
and
all
everything like that.
yeah. And then
So
moving into the building in the east side with his cleaners down on the first floor. Think
yeah,
about that.
amazing, isn't that? I know.
You have a
Now, where
right.
was that? Where
You
was
have
that?
a
Were they in Chicago? Was that
It
supposed to
was
be
New
based in
York.
Chicago? New
I
York?
thought it
Okay.
was, for some reason I'm thinking it was New York. I don't know. That's what wait, was it Chicago? Wait a minute. No, Chicago was Good Times. Let me
Correct.
see.
So it might have been New
Where
York.
I can't let me see right now. I think it was New York. I'm almost positive it was New York. Yep,
Well, the East
Manhattan.
Side. Oh,
Because they
okay.
moved
Okay.
from, yeah, because I meant to say that they moved from Queens. Remember I said in the beginning, and now that I'm thinking about it, they moved from Queens to Manhattan. So that's the Upper East Side. That's
Oh,
what they
okay.
called Manhattan, the Upper East Side, right?
East Side.
So to
Gotcha.
have
Gotcha.
that, have the beautiful building that they probably rode past their whole lives or didn't even go down there, right? And then to be able to have a business within that, I think that that's powerful. So as
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
conclude this first episode of season 5 of More Than Just a Movie, we're going to be breaking down the way we did this. Each episode is different, of classic Black TV. Today we started with the Jeffersons. Who we doing next week, Leroy? Who you want to do? What you want to do? Good Times? Might as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, because those are let's,
We
because we
talked
can kind
about
of
a lot.
do it chronologically. 70s was Good Times, and the Jeffersons. Then you got in the 80s would be Cosby in a Different World. Um, and then let's say the 90s could be My Wife and Kids, and
Fresh Print,
Family Matters.
Fresh
We
Print,
got to do
Mark.
Family Matters. Yeah, we got to do Family Matters,
Oh
and
yeah,
include that
yeah,
in one,
yeah,
and with them. So maybe we do My Wife and
yeah.
Kids and Family Matters, something like that. You know what I'm saying? So,
Well, Wife and Kids was 2000. That was
oh, what? Oh,
2000.
okay,
So we still
okay,
got to get the
okay.
80s, and yeah, we got to get the 80s and 90s. Fresh Prince and Martin was the
Yeah,
90s. So we'll get the
definitely.
80s. We'll go right up the ladder.
And even
We'll
Martin,
go right up
Martin
the
is
ladder.
90s as well. Yeah.
Yeah. That's why I said Martin and Fresh Prince. Yep.
Okay.
We're going to do
Cool.
all of that. And
Yeah.
yeah, we're going to have shows for days. It's going to be fun. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of More Than Just a Movie, where we typically break down classic Black films. But this is season 5, and this is Leroy and I show, so we can do do it how we want. We're going to switch gears and talk about classic Black TV shows that made an impact on your life. If you can remember lines and scenes, then you know that it's classic. Any last words, Leroy, before we end?
I can't wait to do next week Good Times because Miss Bernadette Stannis is one of my
Still
friends
fine.
on IG, and that was
Yeah,
definitely
still
my
fine.
crush. Still is my crush. So she gonna be tagged on our episode next week when we talk about Good Times. So we gotta make sure we tag her on this. So you know.
Okay. Now let's briefly talk about that. How cool is it that now in 2023 that your crushes that you had in the 70s that you never thought you would become near that person or even be able them be tangible to you, that they're literally tangible to you right now. That's deep.
I know, right? And I took a picture with her. This was some years ago. She was here in Baltimore doing a book signing, and I
Yeah.
went to the
That
book signing and got the chance to take the picture with her. I gotta find. I don't know where the picture is.
yeah,
I
you
hope
got to
I
get it
might
for next week.
say it again.
You got to get it for next week's show. You got to get
Yeah,
it for
I'm
next
gonna have to
week's
see if I
show.
can find it because I don't know if I put it on Facebook or not because I think it was around. I don't know if it was before Facebook came out or after Facebook came out. I know I took the picture. I think it was before because I got it 6 by 9 because I went and I had it taken out. I thought I had it framed too,
I
but
bet you
I'll have
did.
to look for it. Yeah, I'm gonna have to try and
I
find it
bet you
to
did.
look for it.
It might be over your bed.
No, I ain't did that.
It might
But
be
for
poster
sure.
size over your bed. I'm
I
surprised
know,
you
right?
did.
For real, get it
For
blown up.
every
Poster
for
size.
every look, for every black boy in America, and every black man that had a crush on Thelma Evans, I think every man in our generation
It
had a
was
crush on her.
it was three women, and I'm gonna give them to you real quick. It was Bernadette Stannis,
Mhm.
Thelma. It was Jane
Mhm.
Kennedy for
Of course.
football, and it was Miss
Mhm.
Pam Grier,
Pam, there you go.
the
There
original,
you
the
go.
Foxy Brown, the real Foxy
There you
Brown.
go. And they all was fine, and it's all fine as wine, and still here right
Absolutely.
now. They're all still here right now. Amen.
You
All
just
right,
gave me an
everybody.
idea.
Thank
I
you
got to
so
do
much
that
for
for more.
watching. Oh Lord. This always gives you ideas. This show always gives you
You gotta
ideas, and
do.
I
That's
love
gonna be
it.
my
I love
evening
it.
conversation. I'm gonna do Thelma, Foxy Brown, and Jane Kennedy. Which one? I can't think of a third one that would go with them. But which one was your crush? This will be for the men, and then I gotta find some for the women back then. Who you all's crush was back then? I don't know. You have to give me an idea on
It
that
wasn't
one.
no Stony Jackson. Ty Bridges. Ty,
Yeah, it might have been Todd
Ty
Bridges. Yeah, Todd
Bridges.
Bridges.
You
Yeah,
can throw
yeah.
Stony Braxton. People like I didn't like Stony, but Stony Braxton, Ty Bridges. You could do, well, the women you could do. It was Janet Jackson and Charlene,
Oh, that's true too.
or
Yeah.
Kim
So
Fields.
Janet might be the fourth one that I do. Who the
Yeah,
crush
she might
was.
do that.
Michael might have
Yeah,
been you. I
yeah,
don't
because
know how
Charlene.
much if you all
No,
loved Michael Jackson. Yeah, because I think it was
Ty
Todd
Bridges
Bridges,
was
maybe
fine.
Michael Jackson.
Let me tell you something, Ty Bridges now. And I was on a live one day, and Ty Bridges showed up on my Instagram live, and I was like, "Yo, you have no idea, Ty Bridges, man. He was everything back in the day. Don't
Yeah,
even sleep on that. So we
for
got to
real,
do
for real.
different strokes. We got to do
Yeah.
different strokes and facts of life. We got to do different strokes and facts of life. That's like a part of
Oh,
my childhood, like for real.
absolutely. Tootie,
I gotta,
are
we
you
gotta end so I can write all these down.
are you kidding me?
Wait, I got my pad. I keep a pad right by my little my where my shows are, because we constantly writing. Wait, here go my pen right here. All right, so let's write these. So let me write Good Times, Fresh Prince, Cosby, A Different World, y'all in real time talking about what we're gonna do. um, Martin,
And then you said don't forget the Facts of Life and different and
Facts of Life,
different strokes.
Different Strokes,
Yeah, Family Matters. My wife. Yeah, Family Matters.
Family Matter. Oh, we got a lot coming up. And this list is going to go on and on and on with my macaroon pen. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for watching. Remember, you're a star. Don't allow anyone to dim your shine. Watch some classic TV so you can come back and join this conversation. If you're watching this live or the playback, tell us your favorite episode of The Jeffersons. And if you were little watching The Jeffersons, or when you got older, you started watching the reruns, let's talk about it because I got the DVDs now. I ain't playing them, but I got the DVDs. All right, y'all. Peace. Thank you, Leroy. Bye.
All right, lady.